Welcome to the Lake of the Woods Association Board of Directors candidate interviews. In accordance with the established rotation of terms for membership, 3 seats will become vacant in September. 1 vacancy with 1 year unexpired, and 2 vacancies with 3-year terms. There are 8 eligible candidates. Each candidate has been given the same 10 questions, and each has 30 minutes to answer the questions. This is Heidi Brown, a candidate for the Board of Directors here at the Lake. Heidi, welcome. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you very much. As you said, my name is Heidi Brown. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. I retired from the military last year, and I have only been here for a year. I have a wife named LOWA and we live at 214 Cornwallis. And it's a real pleasure to be here today with you and to be here in the Lake.
Great. Okay, let's get started. Why do you want to be a board member here at the Lake of the Woods?
So I've just completed 36 years of serving our nation, and that's just something that I really feel that serving is my passion. So now that I have plenty of time, I would like to serve this great community. And I think that I bring a lot of attributes in order to do just that.
Okay. What qualifications do you bring to the association?
So I think besides the 36 years of leadership, I've been responsible for budgets that have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars. I've been involved in developing budgets, in contracting, in supply chain management, in building, in construction, reconstruction, conflict management, dealing with people. So I think that I bring a lot to the table.
What do you think are the 3 most important duties of the board?
So first and foremost, it will never escape me that you're elected by the members. And so I think that's really important for each one of us to remember. So with that in mind, I think it's important to make decisions that are in the best interest of the members and the community, to establish policies and procedures, again, that further the association as well as are in the best interest of our members, and provide for security and enhancements of this beautiful subdivision. So I think those are the most important duties, I believe, for a board member.
Where does the role of the board member end and the role of the general manager and his staff begin?
So I know that the board selects a general manager, and the general manager reports to the board. So I just stated that one of the duties of the board is to establish policies. So the general manager is responsible for the day-to-day operations, management, maintenance, and security of all the facilities and the personnel that are part of this great community in accordance with those policies, regulations, directives, and the Virginia law. So that's a big responsibility that he has. And again, he reports to the board.
What is your understanding of the reserve study and how the association uses it?
So the reserve study, from what I understand, is conducted every 3 to 5 years, and it's really a life cycle management plan that allows us to put away money into our reserves for the replacement and repair of our infrastructure and all of the association's facilities. So that initial report, as well as that review of the document, is for us to be fiscally responsible and responsive to those needs. So again, it's for the repair and the replacement of our infrastructure and our facilities across the board. And so that's used at the beginning of each year in order to help with developing our operating budget, if you will.
What is your understanding of the operating budget and how it's developed?
So, interesting question, because one of the things that we've been told is to plan to be at a lot of different meetings from September until February. It's a very extensive process, as one can imagine, to develop an operating budget. So beginning probably shortly after the board is in place in September, the general manager will confer with all of the committees and gather input from them and develop a draft. He then provides that to the finance and planning committees and again input by them into this. Then my understanding is there's a 3-day period or so where all of this is studied and all input brought back in. It is put into a draft budget. There's then a town hall meeting where now you get the member input into this budget. Once that occurs, the feedback from our members is incorporated into that draft budget. The general manager then provides another draft of the budget to the board. The board then goes through the budget, makes sure that it is lays flat, if you will. It's balanced, and that budget is then approved by the middle of February. So a lot of different steps that have to occur in what appears to be a very long period of time, but it's really not. From September-ish until mid-February is not a lot of time to do that.
What suggestions do you have for the administration to work within the budget?
Well, so if you don't work within your budget, then you create a deficit. And a deficit has to be paid somehow. So what I would say is we have to be very fiscally responsive and look at where we are all across the year to make sure that we are not exceeding our budget in different areas. And the one thing I think that I've learned in the past year is our finance committee that is made up of a lot of individuals with incredible pedigree and expertise, that we should listen to them more and make sure that we carry the input, the recommendations that they bring into that budget to make sure that we are living within our means, spending within our means, so that we don't have deficits, cost overruns, and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. What capital issue do you feel is most important for the association to complete?
So clearly the CARC project is the number one project. I think it's if it's not the most expensive, it's probably one of the most expensive, and it certainly is the one that is on everybody's mind. And that, I think it is imperative that we ensure that project stays on track. $5 million is a lot of money, and we need to make sure that we stay on schedule so that, again, going back to the previous question, we don't have a deficit that we have to make up or have cost overruns. So that, I think, is the number one project.
Mm-hmm. As a board member, you will be scrutinized by members of the community during meetings, on social media, and elsewhere. How do you feel about that, and how will you handle it?
So I think that scrutiny in the workplace is beneficial. There are levels of that scrutiny, for sure. But I think that for me personally, what I want people to know is, I'm all about transparency, common sense, integrity, and you will know where I'm coming from. I think one of the reasons why there's a lot of scrutiny, and it's everywhere, right? It's in all the workplaces, it's with our nation, et cetera. It's because people don't necessarily understand the why of a decision or the background behind it. I'm going to be totally transparent. People will always know how I feel, what and why I feel that way, and I think that will help relieve some of the scrutiny and provide more transparency, at least where I'm concerned.
How do you view your responsibility as a new incoming board member to carry out those decisions that were made before your tenure?
So I think the new board will need to look at the previous decisions, make sure that they're still necessary, that we still have the money to accomplish them, and then ensure that that's in our plan going forward. But I do think it's important to take a look back, not necessarily to start going crazy and trying to stop things, but just make sure they're necessary and they're affordable.
All right. That's Heidi Brown, another candidate for the board. Thank you, Heidi, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
This is Pete Brown, another candidate for the board of directors. Pete, why don't you tell us something about yourself?
Thank you, Marilyn. I've moved here. I bought a lot about 5 years ago at Lake of the Woods. My daughter lives in Herndon, and our grandchildren are there. So this was a place that we wanted to move to from our home in North Carolina, where we lived for over 40 years. We bought our lot about 5 years ago, rented for a year while we built our house, and this has become home. What we found about Lake of the Woods, we absolutely love it here. It's got anything you could possibly want, plus it's not pretentious. So we've enjoyed our time here. I'm involved with LOWA, the Visual Arts Council. Had the pleasure of serving on the 50th anniversary committee, and it's just been a wonderful experience. We've met more people, done more things, and had more fun than we did of 40 years of living in North Carolina. So it's this is home.
Great. Why do you want to be a board member at Lake of the Woods?
For the reasons I just stated, this I think is a wonderful community, and I want to do my part. I step up, and somebody has to try to continue to make it a wonderful community. It takes good people that are willing to commit the time and energy, and I am very grateful for the last 50 years of leadership to make our community what it is today. I was looking at U.S. U.S. inflation index shows that in 1968, our HOA fees here were $200. Today's dollars, they should be $1,434. Right now, they're at $1,464, within $30 of inflation alone, and we have all of these wonderful amenities that we enjoy today. I just want to make sure that we maintain, we keep the vision going, and make this a wonderful place to live. I want to try to restore civility in our conversations. To me, that is one of the main reasons I've stepped up and said, let's try to do this. Let's try to see if we can be civil to one another. We're all members of equal standing. There's only one class of membership. So what I want to do is listen to everyone, hear their opinions, and give them equal weight.
Great. What qualifications do you bring to the association?
Well, let's see. My career was in sales and management, but I did serve on an HOA in the town of Harrisburg, North Carolina, where I resided for 40 years. In a new home development, sometimes things aren't quite where they need to be. In our case, we had a gravel road. If you're familiar with roads made of pit gravel, they can be quite dusty. So one of the challenges for us there was to unite the community, to pony up the money to pay, each of us paid an assessment to have the road paved and then later taken over by the state. So that was quite an ordeal, but it taught a lot about HOA types of negotiation. But I enjoyed that experience. I think I bring to the table the ability to listen and to negotiate, because I've had to do that my entire career.
What do you think are the three most important duties of the board?
Well, first and foremost, probably adherence to our governing documents. We have to make sure that we are living within our bylaws. We have to operate within our budgets. That is very important. And of our monitoring our 5-year plan, make sure that we're on track, on schedule with these items, tackle them in order of importance, and try to make sure that we are always looking out for the greater good of the community.
What does the role of the board member end and the role of the general manager and his staff begin?
The board members, with the input of our committees, whom I think are the backbone of our community, the committees do the heavy lifting, if you will. The board evaluates the recommendations, and they set policy. then the general manager is authorized to execute those plans. He has the authorization through staff to implement the things that are recommended and approved by the board. He has to be given rein to do that. The board simply monitors the process and makes sure that everything is still on track. So the board of directors is not in the day-to-day management of Lake of the Woods. They are to set the policy, make the recommendations, and the general manager and staff are to carry those things out.
What is your understanding of the reserve study and how the association uses it?
We operate on a rolling 5-year plan. We follow recommendations of Miller-Dotson study that says within that 5-year plan, these are the projects that we need to do to keep current with what we need. And as we plan something, for instance, road paving, funds are set aside in restricted reserves, and they are to be used only for those purposes. There are several reserve funds that are restricted just to those things that we have set out in the plan. What we have to make sure is that we don't defer too much, that we don't shift too many times. The board does have the opportunity or the right to do that as they see needed, but we try to live within those parameters set out in the 5-year plan.
What is your understanding of how the association operating budget is developed?
Well, again, with that 5-year plan, we set out the goals. The operating centers within the community, the staff makes their expense proposals to the general manager. The general manager gathers all of the different operating centers, the golf center, the community, the clubhouse, etc., gets their expense needs gathered. Then we look at projected revenues. Basically are two things: our assessments plus our various fees for new roads and construction that are new construction. Those are tallied up as the revenue side, the expense side are matched up. Then the general manager and staff prepare what they think we're going to have to do by dividing. Those numbers are compared, divided amongst the number of lots, and our assessment is developed from that. The board then approves or studies, evaluates, maybe makes recommendations, but approves, has the final approval of that budgeting process.
What suggestions do you have for the administration to work within the budget?
Much as we in our own homes have to live within our means, that's what we have to do, and I think that is, I think we do a good job of that. What we have to do is simply look at operating funds and leave the restricted funds for their purpose. We have to not add too many things to there. If something comes up, it may have to wait until it can be worked into the plan. We can't jump off course. So if we stay the course on our 5-year plan and we prioritize by order of importance, what we need to do is to avoid the need of urgency. Something relatively unimportant left to the last minute becomes urgent, and then it may take precedent over something that is very important. So we want to prioritize by order of importance and follow those plans, work them within the plan. And as we're looking for new things, they have to be worked into that rolling 5-year plan.
What capital issue do you feel is most important for the association to complete?
Well, obviously, the first and foremost is to complete the CARC project. This is a major undertaking. It's going to add great value to our community, but it needs to go ahead and get started. We have to complete that. And I think that will, once we get that developed and finished by next year, people will enjoy, and I think for the most part, we'll be glad we have it done. Secondary to CARC, for me personally, it is our ditch restoration and roads projects that need to be taken care of, because those affect the lakes. We have 2 lakes. Our 2 biggest assets are the lakes, Lake of the Woods. So if we can protect the lake by taking care of the drainage issues, that could lead into the proposed 4-bay project. There are 300 tons of silt that come into our lake every year. So trying to abate that those things would work together, the ditch restoration, road paving, and the 4-bay project.
As a board member, you will be scrutinized by members of the community during meetings, on social media, and elsewhere. How do you feel about that, and how will you handle it?
Well, I would say, I guess one of my strengths that has served me well throughout my career is that I'm very level-headed. That criticism is a byproduct of leadership. You're going to get criticized, and it's always been the case. We moved here 5 years ago. There's always been criticism, but someone has to make decisions. And not everyone will always be pleased with those decisions, but they have to be made. I think that I evaluate things, I research things thoroughly. I don't fly by the seat of my pants, but I am able to make decisions, and I think that's an important part of this whole board process. We have to evaluate the hard work of our committees, make sure that all of the things are in sync. There are moving parts of many times. Maintenance has things, different groups have issues. They all need to be addressed, but they have to be evaluated by the board. Fair and impartial decisions, always for the greater good of the community, and that's how we have to operate. But I know, as sure as I'm sitting here, if I were to earn your vote, I will get as criticized as anyone else. People that like me will probably still criticize me. That's just the part of the nature of the beast, if you will, and I'm okay with that. My hide is pretty thick, 40 years of working in sales and sales management.
Okay. How do you view your responsibility as a new incoming board member to carry out those decisions that were made before your tenure?
Well, we have an elective representation. That's what the board of directors is. We elect representatives to do their due diligence and their best to evaluate the needs of our community. Everyone behind us, the previous board, has been duly elected, and they acted in that capacity as the best interest of our community. So as our duly elected representatives, what they have put in place needs to be carried out, just quite simply.
Mm-hmm. That was Pete Brown. Thank you, Pete, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
We're here with another candidate for the board, Ralph Debnan. Ralph, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my wife, Sharon, and I moved down here in 2000. She retired in 2000. We came down here to look at areas. We initially looked at Fawn Lake, didn't particularly care for that too much. So we came over here and found a few lots, and we have just enjoyed our stay. We have met a lot of great people here in the lake, and we've established a lot of friendships. So.
Okay. What do you want to be why do you want to be a board member at Lake of the Woods?
Well, I have been, over a period of years, I have tried from outside the confines of the board to establish or try and get some bylaws, some policy changes, so on and so forth. And I kept running into some roadblocks as to what they would accept, what they wouldn't accept, and so on and so forth. So I kept getting the information back from the people I spoke with. If you want to make a change, you need to be on the board. So it took me a long time, since I'm not a public person by any stretch of the view. It took me a long time to kind of move around and try and adopt that philosophy. So I decided this year that I would try it, and we'll see from there.
Mm-hmm. What qualifications do you bring to the association?
I have a design and construction background, so that gives me. It's a twofold issue. I can see a 50,000-foot view of issues, but at the same token, I have to be very detailed in looking at things, analyzing things, doing research, so on and so forth. So I think the key for me is that if I'm going to make a decision about an issue, you will know that I have researched it extremely well, and I will engage anybody on anything they want to talk about, the facts of the issue, or how to handle why I decided what I did. But some people read books for fun. I do research for fun. So it sounds a little weird, but it technically helps you out a lot in understanding issues and understanding different aspects of how people approach certain things.
What do you think are the three most important duties of the board?
Obviously, physical responsibility. I think that is the number one thing. Communication with the members, I think, is another key factor. In the people that I've talked to, I think that is the number one issue that I've heard the most is there seems to be a lack of knowing what really is going on. It's like we're only getting a piece of the pie, and as opposed to understanding the whole pie. And I think people make better qualifications and understand issues much better if they understand the whole pie, because there are pluses and minuses to every single issue out there, and the only way that you can analyze things is understanding both sides. You may not agree with both sides, and that's perfectly normal, but you at least need to understand it. And I think that is a issue that that is very important for the board also. I think the other thing is the committees. I think we have a lot of expertise in the community. I think a lot of that shows up on the various committees, and I think the board, at least from an outside perspective, not having been there, it seems sometimes that the board kind of bypasses that process, and I would really like to see more emphasis put on listening to what, in fact, they can. Excuse me.
Sure. Sure, no problem. Where does the role of the board member end and the role of the general manager and his staff begin?
The board sets policies, and it is up to the GM to really implement those. The two cannot be separated. They have to be joined because the board has to be able to. You cannot effectively establish policies on paper without understanding the intent of the policy. Mm-hmm. So the intent of the policy has to be conveyed to the board, not only in what the board actually meant versus what was actually written down. I think what's, at least again from an outside point of view, is there's been an unequal weighting. I think that the GM has kind of taken more of a stronger operational role than what the bylaws currently allow him to do, and or authorize him to do based on the board recommendations. I'd like to see that brought back more into balance and have the board take a more active role, especially in issues that deal with communicating with the membership. So.
Mm-hmm. What is your understanding of the reserve study and how the association uses it?
The reserve study, the Miller-Dotson report basically establishes the life expectancies of equipment and issues that we have here in the lake. So we use that as the basis to set aside the amount of reserves that we need to utilize to replace that equipment, that infrastructure, so on and so forth. So again, the that is a life cycle report. And I think I've seen over the years that we are following it fairly closely. I question whether or not the life cycle portion is being driven to the point where we absolutely have to replace something just because a report says that we have to replace it. So, so I think that needs to be addressed a little bit more. But again, I think overall they have done a great job in understanding where issues need to go and where we need to move forward. So.
Mm-hmm. What is your understanding of how the operating budget is developed?
Each operating center does their own budget, and they in turn provide the board with their process based on historical data and future projections. So the issue gets to be is whether or not they are utilizing the two in the correct balance. I know we've had a number of issues. I know the golf course, I'm especially familiar with the golf course. There's a general declining in play, but that is not just our course. That's golf in general. Mm-hmm. I know there's a balancing act that you have to adjust, that you want to give people to meet goals. You set certain guidelines and goals for each of the operating centers to meet. But sometimes those goals, I think, are a little bit unrealistic based on historical data, where we are as a community. We are changing a community, over the years and so on and so forth. Understanding that dynamic is a tough call because it's ever moving. Mm-hmm. But I think generally we do a good job. We just need to kind of fine tune it a little bit more. So. Mm-hmm.
What suggestions do you have for the administration to work within the budget?
That's a tough question. It's being on the outside, not knowing the thought process that goes into the managing of the overall projects. It's a little difficult to fine tune or to understand what points you can point to that would probably make the overall process going easier. I don't know. I don't know if we are doing quarterly or semi-annually updates to the operations center as to whether or not they are on projections to meet their goals. If we are asking them, if they aren't meeting their goals, why they think they're not meeting their goals, what their process is to do to make that change. If they're meeting their goals, is there anything that we can do to assist them to expand that? So I having been on the outside, I don't know that whole process. So that's something that we'll have to look at. So,
what capital issue do you feel is most important for this association to complete?
We've been on an expansion process now for the last 5 or 6 years, culminating with the CART project, and I think my perspective is that I'm concerned about the reserves, and from all the information that I've seen, we are flirting with a lower reserves right now than where we should be. That concerns me. So, any capital project going forward, to me, would either have to be delayed to a point that we get our reserves in line with where they should be, or if the community wants to, as a majority vote, wants to proceed forward with a large capital project, and then we can actually address that issue.
As a board member, you will be scrutinized by members of the community during meetings, on social media, and elsewhere. How do you feel about that, and how will you handle it?
I don't have a problem in engaging people one on one. I've talked to a lot of people, and I learned over a long period of time that you learn more hearing people than talking to them. And so I've learned a lot of things just by simply just listening to what people are saying, and you understand a lot about them personally, and you understand a lot about the issues that are important to them. Obviously, every issue is not important to every individual, and every individual takes a different view of the issue itself. So I don't have an issue with that. I think there is, obviously corporate policy, restricts you on certain things you can do. So I understand that. I don't, and I just don't have an issue with it right now.
How do you view your responsibility as a new incoming board member to carry out those decisions that were made before your tenure?
Well, the decisions obviously have been made, and there are issues. You can break it down into financial issues versus policy issues. I would view policy issues a little bit differently, and in the context, if I didn't believe that a policy was enacted that did in the best interest of the community as a whole, I would more have an issue with that. Obviously, once a budget's done, once you said you're going to spend X dollars on X project, then that's a done deal. You just you move on. But there are some issues that I have seen that are policy related that I would maybe have an issue with not wanting to change.
Okay. Well, that's Ralph Debney running for the board. Thank you, Ralph, and good luck.
Thank you.
Our next candidate is William Bill Federley. Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My wife and I moved to Lake of the Woods a little over 3 years ago. We have family in the area, north and east and south, and that's why we moved here. We're from the Cleveland area. My past career, I spent 29 years in law enforcement. I retired as a police lieutenant from the city of Cleveland. And I think with my background and dealing with all walks of life at all levels, I feel that I can make a positive approach and I can communicate with people on any level, and I think that would be beneficial to holding this position, listening to people's needs and wants while still watching the dollars and trying to do the best thing so we can all move forward. Because if you stand still and the rest of the world is moving forward, in reality, you're going backwards. So,
okay. Why do you want to be a board member here at Lake of the Woods?
Well, as I stated, I'm a full-time resident, and my wife and I have a vested interest in our community. And as I just got done saying, I feel that I can contribute in a positive manner for our future of our community. And I think that's where we all want to go. I know everybody deep in their heart wants to have the best, be the best they can be, but you always got to watch the dollars and cents. It just sneaks up on us.
Mm-hmm. What qualifications do you bring to the association?
Well, for 6 years, from 2000, after I retired, we moved to South Fort Myers, Florida, and we lived in a gated community called Gulf Harbor Yacht and Racquet Club. It was on the shores of the Caloosahatchee River near Sanibel Island. And I served as treasurer on the Tamarind Cay Condominium Association board for 2 years. There were 21 subsections within Gulf Harbor. You could buy anything from $150,000 all the way to $18 million, just depending on what you wanted. They had an across-the-board great variety of housing, but they didn't have all the amenities that we enjoy here. Mm-hmm. And it was much more expensive.
Okay. What do you think are the 3 most important duties of the board?
Well, you have to listen to the members and in order to better serve the community. And you have to maintain the infrastructure, being fiscally responsible, as I said earlier, and you got to maintain the amenities, whether they start to fail, wear down, or need complete replacement. The third thing would be to ensure the reserve fund is adequately funded, because you never know what tomorrow might bring. There could be a major disruption in something where something just fails completely, and you don't want to be sandbagged or caught off guard or blindsided. So you have to maintain that you have adequate reserve funds.
Okay. Where does the role of the board member end and the role of general manager and his staff begin?
Well, the board of directors is responsible for the governance of this community. And at the behest of the board, the general manager and his staff execute and enforce all the rules and regulations and manage the daily basis of all the operations of all the amenities. And basically that's their role. And there's also feedback from them as to, on a day-to-day basis, they know what is and what isn't, what's coming short, and the board takes that into consideration too. It's a day-to-day operation.
Okay. What is your understanding of the reserve study and how the association uses it?
Well, Miller Dodson is a outfit that projects life expectancy, whether it be equipment, trucks, buildings, swimming pools, all these things that we have here that make our life so great. That's only a guide, if I may use an example. Say there's a Ford dump truck, and they go across the board, and how many companies in construction have used that same model and make and year, and at so many miles, or 150 or 200,000 miles, it got to the point where it was cheaper to replace it than repair it. However, we could look at what we have, and if there's only 80,000 miles on that truck, and Miller Dodson is showing that it should be replaced this year, we could set that for another year or two until we got the appropriate mileage and/or the repairs became so great that it's better to replace. It's Miller Dodson's strictly a guide, and yeah, that's basically what I just said.
And yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I gave an example, but I'm having a little trouble with my eyesight. So.
Okay. What is your understanding of how the operating budget is developed?
Well, from the general manager and his staff, he prepares a summary, and this is based on the day-to-day operations of Lake of the Woods, and he has managers underneath him, the assistant manager, general manager, plus M&E, et cetera, Lakes manager, and they attend the committee meetings and they report back to the board, and we take their input, and then we listen to the committees with emphasis on the financial and the planning committees. They're very important to what we do in this community. And the whole idea is to form an agenda to present to the board of directors. And then the board of directors acts on the problem or the upcoming issue on an item by item basis based on all the input from the committees and from the GM and his staff.
What suggestions do you have for the administration to work within the budget?
Well, if elected, I will seek input, as I stated before, from management, the committees, and the members, because we're all in this together. And I think communication is utmost importance, because somehow it seems in the last year especially that communications broke down. It used to be people have a conversation. You say what you say, the other side gives you their opinions. And somewhere in the middle you usually meet. But it seems of late that we used to talk to each other, then they talked at each other, now they're talking past each other. We have to correct that. We're all in this together. Every lot owner, every member of this association has a vested interest in the well-being of this community. And I plan to keep an open mind, open ears, and take everything in. I'd rather have more data than less data, so you can come to a proper conclusion and make the right decision when it comes to voting on something, which way to improve, to replace, or let it go for another year, or whatever. It all depends on all the input from the committees, as I said, and the management.
Okay. What capital issue do you feel is most important for the association to complete?
Well, I gave this a lot of thought. I thought, after I really gave it a lot of time, and I sat back and I really thought about it. And I think all the amenities in this community are important. And the reason I say that is if you're an avid golfer and you don't use anything else, your whole focus is on the golf course. Well, somebody else is involved with the lakes, and they want that to be bacteria-free and silt that runs in all the time from upstream. And you have to take care of these things. So they have an agenda for that. The golfer has one. Then there's people like equestrian. And then there's people like pickleball and tennis. So all the amenities are important because, for example, we've been here 3 years. I have never used the pool. I don't own a boat. I don't golf. I don't ride horseback. I don't play pickleball or tennis because I have bad knees. But would I lose or give up any of these for our members? No way. These are all important. If you do that and you pick one over the other, you're disenfranchising somebody. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, they feel they're not part of the equation and their voice doesn't matter. And I think we've seen the result of that of late with the animus that comes out of some of the meetings where people shout from the audience. We have to get back to civility and have that conversation.
As a board member, you will be scrutinized by members of the community during meetings on social media and elsewhere. How do you feel about that, and how will you handle it?
Well, the secretary of the board of directors handles all correspondence directed to the board at large. As I just previously stated, when it comes to scrutiny, say, for example, at a meeting, which was in the question, I would sit there with an open mind, open ears, and take it all in. Because again, you can't say that one member's opinion outweighs another member's, but you try to serve the whole. And I'm smart enough to know that you can't serve 100% of the people 100% of the time and make them all happy. It just doesn't happen. But to go to one extreme or the other extreme is not good either. We have to meet in the middle and move forward as a community, as a group. And that is very, very important. And after all, you can't criticize people that get up and that will voice their displeasure with certain items, because this is part of America, and we have a thing called the Constitution and the First Amendment. You don't have to argue with them face to face, but you listen. And if they're a little overwhelmed and a little overheated with what they say and it could have been done nicer, that's their loss. But I would sit and listen whether they shouted or did it in a congenial manner, because it's not their demeanor so much as what they're saying. And that is of utmost importance. So again, we get the feel for the whole community so to better serve them, because we are their representatives. And we're supposed to do what is good for the entire membership, and that's where I lie. And keeping with that, when you talk about, somebody asked me a couple weeks ago, well, what's your agenda? I says, I don't have one, because the agenda is given up at each meeting, what is to be discussed and voted upon. But if I did have an agenda, it would be honesty, integrity, transparency, and most of all, common sense. If those are also fit your format as members in your agenda, then I guess I might be your guy. So, and I would appreciate your vote if you think I meet the qualifications to best represent you. But again, there are 7 members, and the 7 members all have opinions, and they put input in, and the board would come to a common decision based on merit. Right. And that's where that is.
Okay. So how do you view your responsibility as a new incoming board member to carry out those decisions that were made before your tenure?
Well, I won't know until if and when I were to be elected. I mean, that would be a moot point if I were to lose or not be one of the 3 selected. But I would deal with all those issues at the appropriate time, being fiducially responsible with common sense again. Common sense is the most important thing here with everything, but we have to mind the bank stores, you know, the money and reserve. Again, if something major jumps off and we're stretched and we're short in the reserve fund, that could cause a world of hurt. And also, projects that are already in the works that might take a year or more to complete, the board will transition in September, and maybe they run into a snag that they didn't foresee, not through their overlooking it on purpose. It's something that just come up and not have provisions for it. And the new board would have to face those issues on an item-by-item basis and adjust and do what is necessary to complete the project as best we can and circumvent any things that went wrong or snags, so to speak.
Okay. Well, that's been Bill Federley. Thank you, Bill, and good luck.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And again, to all your members out there, if you feel I'm your guy, vote accordingly. We have a fine group of people running this time, 8 for 3 positions. So I'm just one of them. But if you think I can do the job, I appreciate your vote. And if you like somebody else, that's good too, because we have a lot of qualified people running this time. Thank you.
This is William Logan, another candidate for the Board of Directors of the Lake of the Woods Association. Mr. Logan, why don't you tell us something a little bit about yourself?
First of all, good morning, Marilyn. I'm glad to be here. My name is, again, William Logan. I go by Jim because I'm a junior, and my wife, Pat, and I have been here for 14 years. And I have, at this point, 3 children, 6 grandchildren, 1 on the way, and 2 great-grandchildren. So this is my retirement home, and they're up here enjoying all the amenities, and they don't have any trouble seeing Pop-Pop. Other than that, this is my forever home. I'm not moving. I love living here, and the wife really enjoys the shopping around here, so she's not leaving either. So, again, thank you for having me.
Okay. Now, why do you want to be a board member at Lake of the Woods?
Well, as I said, I've been here for 14 years, and I've been on numerous committees and all, and I feel that there's a gap between the communication between the membership and the board, and I would like to get on the board to close that gap and have more communication with them, and I would really like to be their voice on the board.
What qualifications do you bring to the association?
Besides the years I've been here, I have been chair of the Finance Committee for a year, and I've been on almost 6 years of the Finance Committee. I've also been on the Elections Committee and the Safety and Security Committee. I've also have a professional background with the Department of Homeland Security and also with the Department of Justice, among other jobs I've held during my careers. And I've also served on 2 other HOA boards. And I think talking to people, finance, and the other things I've done in life would make me a good candidate for the board.
What do you think are the 3 most important duties of the board?
Well, the 3 most important duties, again, is that the general manager and the board must work together closely. They have to make sure they understand the budget process and make sure that the repair and replacement reserve is fully funded. They also have to ensure that all the policies and programs are followed, both of them, and also they have to listen to the members and find a solution to solve their problems.
Where does the role of the board member end and the role of the general manager and his staff begin?
Well, the board of directors sets the policies and procedures of the running of this. Really, it's a city. The general manager must, of course, follow that, report to the board, and also ensuring that the policies and programs are properly carried out. And also, again, to talk to the owners and membership and make sure everyone's in coordination with each other so this place runs smoothly.
What is your understanding of the reserve study and how the association uses it?
Okay, the reserve study, I'm well acquainted with that because, as I say, I've been on the finance committee for a number of years, is that we have Miller Dotson now, and he's our specialist. And what he does is every 4 or 5 years, he comes in, looks at the amenities, and also by looking at, he also looks at the components. And those are things that make up the amenities. And what their job mostly does is to tell us how much length of time they have maybe, and whether they have to be repaired, whether they have to be replaced. And in doing that and coordinating with the board and the general manager, they write up a procedure and a policy for how many years to look forward on that, to making sure that our amenities are kept as great as they are today. And also, by doing that, they also are able to know in the future what expenses we need, and also that helps us set the amenities cost. And in conjunction with everyone, we can look at and say, hey, we do have the best amenities.
What is your understanding of how the operating budget is developed?
Well, I've sat in quite a few with the Finance Committee, and basically what happens is the general manager looks out to his operational chairs, let's say, and he asks them, what do we need next year? What do we have to buy? What can we get by without? What can we repair to save money? And he compiles that, and then after that, he generally lets the planning and the finance committee, give a heads up of what's going on. And then around October or maybe a little later, there's a 3-day meeting with the planning, the finance, the general manager, his main people, and we also have the board members sit in. And for 3 days, we go over the entire budget. And there are back and forth, do we need this, do we need that? But what we do is we get a consensus of what we want to do next year, what it's probably going to cost, so it runs smoothly. Then there's usually a town hall meeting where everyone comes in, the proposed budget, not the final budget, the proposed budget is put out, and people have a chance to look at it and make comments. Then the general manager goes back and he puts it all in a big binder, a big binder. And they also have some goals in there that the board wants to do. And that goes to the board, and the board considers it, may send it back for additional information, and then they finalize it and vote on it, and that sets the amenity and the cost for the following year.
What suggestions do you have for the administration to work within the budget?
Well, the GM should adhere to the procedures and policies, especially in the area of sole source contracts. We need 3 bids on most things over $25,000. We need to do that. Also like to see more attention given to suggestions of the Finance Committee, because we have a great wealth of knowledge, experience, and people who have been in finance for their whole life, basically. The GM should also adhere to approved budgets. Keep the budgets from running over, and also we need to build up the reserve so that we have money when things happen, whether emergency or not, to run this place and not be in a deficit.
What capital issue do you feel is most important to the association to complete?
I'm glad you asked. That's probably the most important question today. The beginning of this board's term and others, they set goals. what they really wanted to accomplish this year. And the number one goal is it's a flat run 4-bay project. Now, for people who don't know what a 4-bay is, I don't know if you do either, a 4-bay really is just a big hole. And water coming down, it goes into the hole, and the chemicals and the silt and all, they're allowed to break up and settle at the bottom so that the water coming out of that 4-bay is cleaner. The problem is we don't have one. So all the water coming down the Flat Run farm, it's got nitrogen, phosphorus, and silt. And the problem with that is it goes directly into the lake, and according to the EPA, we have 3 times the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus in that lake. And that's hurting the lake itself for fishing and everything else. Another big problem is silt. If anyone's been through the back gate, there's Turtle Island over there to the other side where that gravel place is. Silt is coming in there, so much silt is there, built up right now. There's only 8 inches of water between the top of the water and the ground underneath. And one of the board members even stated he took his pontoon boat over there and almost fouled his prop. There's just too much buildup. That has to be looked at, and the board has kicked it down the road another 6 years to 2024. So, and then of course there's the Carp project, and that's further along, but neither project has been started. And I think the next board to come in really has to look at those 2 issues.
Mm-hmm. As a board member, you'll be scrutinized by members of the community during meetings, on social media, and elsewhere. How do you feel about that, and how will you handle it?
Well, let me tell you, through my career, I was in the Army, I was a sergeant in the Army. After that, I went on the Metropolitan Police for 20 years. After I did that, I was a high school teacher. I gained a master's degree, and I was teaching at high school, and I taught at the jail, the juveniles, and also emotionally disturbed children. And following that, I was hired by the Department of Justice and then Homeland Security. So basically, I'm kind of even in talking to people and understanding, and I've always learned through all that experience is it's better to listen than to talk. And what I want to do if I get on the board is that's what I want to do. I want to listen and try and find out if there are problems, how are we going to solve that problem? If we can't, we can't. But at least give them a transparent answer.
How do you view your responsibility as a new incoming board member to carry out those decisions that were made before your tenure?
Okay, a lot of the residents here don't know we have carryover projects. And there's like the Third Gate project, things like that. Now these have been approved by the board and approved for funding, but we've never actually done them. And we also have, I said, the 4-bay, we also have the CARC, and we also have a lot of other goals that we would like to do. And when the new board comes up, they're just going to have to handle those issues. And I hope when I'm on there, I will be able, with my knowledge, to be able to help them follow through on those projects.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Jim Logan. Thank you, and good luck.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. I appreciate coming here today.
Right now we have Alan Priester, another candidate for the Board of Directors. Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, Marilyn. I'm Alan Priester. I have been here at the lake for about 20 years, a little more. I came here to the lake. I was looking for, at the time, I was a road warrior, really, truly on the road with my job 5 days a week. I was looking for a place to just kind of be able to relax on the weekends. So I purchased my home here. My road warrior days ended shortly after that, thank goodness. And though I have been working full time for those 20 years and have been either commuting into North Virginia or to Richmond here of late. So during that time, I've worked primarily as a program and project manager for Department of Defense and associated three-letter agencies, shall we say, and here of late for about the last 12 years been working for the Federal Reserve out of Richmond, protecting what little money we have left.
Okay. All right, we'll get right to the questions. Why do you want to to be a board member here at Lake of the Woods?
Like I said, I've lived here for the past 20 years. I have enjoyed, the amenities here, very much. I very much enjoy, Lake of the Woods. I'm now coming up to ending my professional career at the moment, and I'm, looking for a way to give back to the community, to this wonderful place I've been living, and to still be able to use some of the talents and experience that I've had over the past 40 years.
Okay. What qualifications do you bring to the association?
Good question, Marilyn. My career, I've been 35 years in project and program management. Right now, I am a certified project management professional. I carry the PMP, kind of like other people have PE or CFA or CPA behind their name. And what this means is I've been certified by the Project Management Institute, which is the international book of knowledge when it comes to program and project management, in order to be able to manage projects, bring a discipline to those projects, bring the financial and fiscal responsibility to those projects, and to see them to completion. The Department of Defense sent me to the Defense Management College to get my diploma in program management, and that plus the experience of managing multi-million and multi-year projects successfully for all these agencies is what I want to bring to the board.
Okay. What do you think are the 3 most important duties of the board?
In my opinion, the 3 most important things that a board member needs to do is number 1 is uphold the governing documents of this homeowners association and the associated regulations from the County of Orange and the Commonwealth of Virginia, because they do have some laws and regulations that go along for homeowner associations. So I think that's the number 1 thing duty that we have to do. The second duty, as such, is to provide the guidance, the direction, the funding, and what have you for the maintenance of the community, its infrastructure, its amenities, in order to protect our property values, to be quite honest. And the third thing, I think, is to work to gain a consensus between the homeowner members, the general manager and his staff, as well as the board, and then implementing the programs that's going to do number 1 and number 2 ahead of time, to actually maintain these amenities and our infrastructure.
Okay. Where does the role of the board member end and the role of the general manager and his staff begin?
Okay, good question. In my opinion, and in my world, the general manager is kind of like the program manager for Lake of the Woods. It's his job to run the day-to-day operations, and he has several little project managers, doing, taking care of the roads, taking care of the golf course, and what have you. It is his job, once the board has made a decision and has given the guidance and given him the funding, to go implement those things that the board has decided. So in my world of project management, the board is kind of like the sponsor. They're the ones with a need and the money, and the general manager is one that is in charge then of implementing that direction, for the funds that's been made available to him.
Okay. What is your understanding of the reserve study and how the association uses it?
The reserve study. I have read through the Miller-Dodson reserve, study report as such, and it's my understanding that the general manager will take, the results of that report as far as the things that are needed for the community and the recommendations from Miller-Dodson in order to put together, what the reserves will be, and eventually, that folds into what the budget's going to look like.
Okay. What is your understanding of how the operating budget is developed?
The operating budget. As I had mentioned before, the general manager plays a big part in this. he gets the Miller-Dotson report and its recommendations, plus he has his entire staff and their areas of responsibility, then to put together a recommended budget for the board to consider. The board also has its 22 committees that are out there to get feedback from and help work with the general manager to put the final budget recommendation into shape that is finally voted on. I have been following the process through the Lake Currents and have attended several of the meetings, so I have seen some of this in action.
Okay. What suggestions do you have for the administration to work within the budget?
That's also a good question. I guess in my opinion, and going back on my project management experience, I would question and have every line item that's in that budget, justified. It needs to be justified, and then after it's been justified, then it needs to be prioritized, so that once a priority has been set, we make sure that we take care of the most important things first, and then kind of work down the list. The other thing I would do is we need to look at the revenue side. Right now, our revenue that offsets our costs only come from two places. It either comes from member assessments or the usage fees for our amenities, whether this is the contractor road fees that they pay, or whether we pay a tea time to go play golf or buy a meal here at the clubhouse. So that's where the revenue is generated from. And I do think that we need to look and find some more creative ways to perhaps increase the revenue side, and maybe hopefully de-emphasize the need to increase assessments if that's at all possible. The other ideas that I have is I think that the general manager and his staff, if there's not one in place, should have a formal incentive program, and they be incentivized on saving money. For example, there's a line item in our current budget for a Ford F-150 pickup truck for the Equestrian Center. $38,000. So our budget and our assessments are all set to pay that $38,000 for that Ford F-150 pickup truck. I think that the general manager and staff should be incented to go out and, just like you and I would when we're going to go buy a vehicle, we'll go to dealer A, dealer B, dealer C, negotiate what have you, and suppose they get the same truck now for $30,000. I think that a small portion of that should be returned back to the people that are saving the money, and then the resulting savings be rolled into the reserve fund, so that when next year's budget comes around, that $8,000 savings right now is I know it represents only like a $2 per year savings of the on assessment, but think about what happens if we had a savings like that across the $1.4 million that is in our capital budget for this year.
Okay. What capital issue do you feel is most important for the association to complete?
When it comes to the capital projects, my opinion is that we should be concentrating on those major capital assets, that make our community unique. And to me, that's the lakes and the roads. That's the first thing that people see when they come in. And after all, we're known as Lake of the Woods. We're not the Equestrian Center of the Woods. So I think the capital projects, for the Flat Run Forebay, the dredging of Keaton's Lake, and the road repairs needs to be right up there at the top of the list.
Okay, as a board member, you'll be scrutinized by members of the community during meetings, on social media, and elsewhere. How do you feel about that, and how will you handle it?
Okay. As a project and program manager all my career, I've always been out in front of people. The number one rule of project management is the project manager is responsible. And I take that responsibility, quite seriously. And as such, particularly when I'm working for such organizations like the Department of Defense and for the Federal Reserve, my actions out in public, have a potential of reflecting on my organization. And I'm proud of that organization, and I want nothing to reflect badly on it. So this has been my my experience and the way I've had to structure my life based on the folks that I've worked with, and I would bring that same attitude toward the board and working with the board because I'm very proud of this organization as well.
How do you view your responsibility as a new incoming board member to carry out those decisions that were made before your tenure? Okay.
As far as the first duty of a board member is to uphold the covenants and regulations of the homeowners association. So that should be the guiding rule among everything. At the same time, we do know that demographics change, member sentiment changes, different things happen that might cause us to maybe change course. I think the board does need to maintain its flexibility, but where legal binding documents are in place, that's something that we really can't change. I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and I would be working with the existing board members and the general manager to figure out what changes need to be made and if it's necessary, and work it accordingly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That was Alan Priester, another candidate for the Board of Directors. Thank you, Alan, and good luck.
Thank you, Marilyn. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate your vote. Thank you.
This is Adrian Terranor, known as Terry. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I just turned 73 years old. I was married for 50 years and divorced last year. We raised 3 children. I've got 7 grandchildren. 4 of them live up in the Vienna area, an hour from here, that I see quite frequently. My oldest son and his 2 kids live up in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I've been in the Lake of the Woods since 2012. Bought a house here because I like the community and like the benefit of having over 4,000 units within the development that gave me the confidence that any unexpected expenses or planned long-term expenses would be spread out over a larger portion than a smaller community of 500, 800, 1,000 people, giving me more financial security.
Okay. So why do you want to be a board member at Lake of the Woods?
Yeah, they basically go back to what I just said. It's a beautiful community. I bought in the community 6 years ago because I liked the community as a whole. The ancillary facilities had little, if any, draw for me. I don't golf. I like to swim, but I'm a diver, not a swimmer. So the pool at that point wasn't a big draw. I had a sailboat that had been given to me, and I thought I would get it on the lake, but that never happened. And so my boating experience now is limited to my 16-foot Old Town canoe. But the community as a whole drew me because of the size and the diversity. I didn't want to be in a 55-plus retirement community. I want to be around young people. I want to be around new ideas. I want to be around kids that are our future, and that was my draw to this community.
Okay. What qualifications do you bring to the association?
50 years of life experience. I've been an officer in the Army, served in Vietnam in 69, 70. I've never had a high-paying job. So finances have always been tight, but I was able to buy a nice house down here because of a very financially conservative format that I've used in my own life for my whole life. Very rarely have even a car payment to make, keep cars for a long time, maintain them, and I'm looking to put that same fiscal conservatism into our board of directors. There's been some major expenses over the 6 years that I've been here that, with my limited knowledge of the background on those, they just seem to be out of balance with the majority of the members of the association, the homeowners here, and I think that they have not been well represented, and I'm looking to represent that portion of the community.
What do you think are the 3 most important duties of the board?
The single most important duty is a fiduciary responsibility to maintain the quality and fitness of the facility, so that it doesn't draw down property values and it encourages new people to come in. But at the same time, consideration has to be made for the average homeowner, the young family with 2 or 3 kids who are living from paycheck to paycheck. On the opposite end of that spectrum is the retirees like myself who are living on very fixed incomes. I'm fortunate to have a little bit of an IRA that I was able to put together to supplement my Social Security. But again, I lost over 60% of my income with the divorce last year, and that has put a crimp on what I am able to do. And I'm sure there are other people who are widows, widowers, young families with kids with limited incomes. I have heard of some of the people who were complaining about the additional costs to our homeowners association and the $191 that was added for the CARC project, and the very unsympathetic response that some of them have gotten is an advice on how to make more money. Not how we can spend less as a community, but how you can make more so that you can go ahead and pay for our extraordinary expenses. And that's what I want to go away with. The other important aspect of it is overall management, day-to-day management. The general manager we have now seems to be doing a good job overall, but he's been here for at least the 6 years that I've been here, gone through many boards. I have been told, and I have no way of verifying this at this point, but I've been told that he is, if not the highest, one of the highest paid HOA administrators in the state. And I question the value of that. And in my 25 years of retail experience, I've found that for the most part, managers after 3 to 5 years really need to be rotated to get new blood, new ideas, new thoughts, and new interactions with the board and with the membership in the community. I think that would be beneficial to us as a community.
Well, that leads to the next question, which is where does the role of the board member and the role of the general manager and his staff begin?
It begins every day when you walk into the office. The board should be, and I don't know that they are or are not accusing or pointing fingers at anyone one way or the other, but the board should be overseeing the general manager. The general manager should be on a regular basis reporting to the board as to what's going on, and the board giving that individual, male or female, the direction that the community should be going in. With that, it's the responsibility of the general manager to keep the board informed of any situations that might have arisen that should be brought to their attention that might need board action. But again, the oversight and accountability of the general manager to the board, with the board exercising that overall fiduciary responsibility as well as a day-to-day management responsibility. Board members can't be involved in absolutely everything that goes on. We're not going to be involved in the hiring and firing of employees within the development. But other than that, the board should be more attuned to the daily activities and holding the general manager completely accountable for those day-to-day activities.
Okay. What is your understanding of the reserve study and how the association uses it?
My understanding of it is relatively limited. I understand what a reserve study is and how I believe it should be used. And that is with a committee or an outside organization having done a study on the expected life expectancy, projected life expectancy of any particular facility or piece of equipment, that a percentage of our annual dues or fees, HOA fee, is then set aside specifically for that. And then when that needs to be replaced, a car or truck 5 years, 8 years, 10 years down the road, or when it reaches X number of miles, and the cost to repair and maintain become excessive, then we have the $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 set aside specifically to replace that vehicle. That is the reserve that is withheld. My understanding right now is that one of the reserves that should be in effect has rather been overridden. Several boards ago, talked to former board members. One of our fees is new construction fees, where people are charged $3.50 a square foot for new construction, $2.50 for something else, and $1.50 for additional. I can't remember exactly what those different fees are for, but those fees are ostensibly to replace and repair roads that are damaged or suffer additional use because of heavy equipment coming into the development to deliver the materials to build those houses. There was a time when there was a separate budget item, a line item that was designated specifically for that road repair, and all of those funds went into that particular earmark. I was told again by a former board member that when he was on the board, there was a move to do some kind of a project in the development, and they looked at the money that was in this road repair and maintenance facility account as found money that they could all of a sudden use to complete whatever project they felt was appropriate at the time, giving no concern to the future when that money that was being earmarked was going to be needed, and that was going to result in additional fees to the members or the inability to perform those jobs when the time comes because money would not be available.
Okay. What is your understanding of how the association operating budget is developed?
I read through I think it was a 3-page report on everything that went on last year with the budget development. And it seems like a rather lengthy process, but when you're talking about the over $5 million that the association handles each year, and the number of committees and the number of facilities that we have, I couldn't see any way to streamline that initially. Now, getting involved in it directly myself, I may have some ideas down the road, but it seems like a fairly comprehensive system at this point, and everyone seems to get a chance to voice their opinion, and then the board gets a chance to make modifications and make suggestions to that. So on the surface, it seems like a pretty good system. It might be a little bit cumbersome. It took up a lot of time over about a 2-month period with various committee meetings and everything, but I don't know that I have a way that can be shortened or streamlined.
Mm-hmm. What suggestions do you have for the administration to work within the budget?
Again, I have had to work personally within a very limited income for the last 50 years, and it's simply a matter of dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's and really looking at what options you have. If you're going to buy a new truck, will a $30,000 truck do instead of the $35,000? Yeah, the 35 might be nice to have. It might be a little bit shinier, might be a little bit bigger, but is it needed? And my own personal experience has been you make do with the least you can possibly do that will get the job done. There are times, and I do home repairs, and there are times when having the right tool makes all the difference in the world, and the time involved in getting something done. So I can take that into consideration as well. But it's basically getting every dollar's worth of work and product for your money as you possibly can. I'm very fiscally conservative, and there's an old saying that I won't repeat here, but you squeeze the penny till the and that has been my philosophy. I mean, 15 years in retail or 25 years in retail and 15 years as an insurance agent and broker has taught me how to get the most out of every dollar I have passed through my hands.
Okay. What capital issue do you feel is most important for the association to complete?
I'm not sure of just what capital projects are in the works, other than the new building over at the near the clubhouse or the golf course, and of course this what I refer to as a monstrosity of the CARC project with and that is the reason that I've thrown my hat into the ring, is the apparent lack of concern on the part of this board and the previous boards in taking into consideration the limited income of, like I said, the young families raising kids and living paycheck to paycheck, and the retirees who are living on fixed incomes. It seems that we have an awful lot of people in this development who are retired, high-ranking military personnel, colonels, full colonels, a general or two, people who have been in high places in big industries who have very comfortable pensions, and a couple $100 a year doesn't mean a doggone thing to them. And to be honest, even in my situation, when you break down that $191, it comes out to about $15 a month. Even a family on a very fixed income can usually look back and find $15, $20 a month that they're wasting on something, whether it's a Starbucks every week or every couple of days or whatever, that can be cut back. $15 is not a lot of money, and it goes back to my original desire to be in this community of having those kind of expenses spread out over 4,000 facilities that minimizes the impact on each one of us. But the long-term cost of this, if this project has a 50-year life expectancy, that's going to cost the development $100,000 a year for that 50-year project. And that's only if it comes into that $5 million budget that everyone is saying it will. But my experience and the people that I've talked to have said that there hasn't been a project in the last 10 years that has come in within budget. Now, I may be corrected on that, but that's, I haven't been that in tuned to things in the 6 years I've been here, because I've had other things going on in that 6 years. So I am fully prepared to be corrected on any of the misconceptions I may have as far as what has gone on and why. But the project, obviously the CARC project, I will be pounding on desks if work is not being done. One of the things that I witnessed recently was the new dock being put up by the clubhouse. I like to use that dock. I build and fly radio control model planes as a hobby, and I fly from that dock. So when it was pulled out, I didn't have a good place to fly, and I was making regular visits to that construction site, and saw many, many days that absolutely nothing was being done. I don't know whether the GM or anyone else on the staff was pounding on the contractor's desk and saying, why the heck don't you have somebody down here doing the work? Why isn't it going to be done on time? It was done almost a month late. And if we have that little oversight and that little concern for a major project that is a seasonal project, this $5 million CARC project has so many loopholes in it and so many ways that it can go south that it is going to have to be overseen, not by some outside third party, but by people in the association, board members, committee members, general managers. Those are the things that really have to be overseen on a day-to-day basis, not left to third-party intermediaries to supervise. We're hiring a general contractor who's supposed to oversee the subcontractors. We've hired a clerk of the works for $150,000 who's supposed to oversee the overseer. And I think that a lot of that is because the way it's being done is so that certain people in higher positions can point fingers when something goes wrong and not have to take the responsibility.
Okay. As a board member, you'll be scrutinized by members of the community during meetings, on social media, and elsewhere. How do you feel about that, and how will you handle it?
I will handle it on a one-to-one basis. Anyone who has a complaint will have my phone number and will have my email address. I don't like third-party accusations, criticisms. If you have a criticism or you think I've done something wrong, call me. Tell me to my face. Talk to me. Let me know what your feelings are. I will address them to the best of my ability. If I can't answer your question, I will look for an answer for you. I am completely upfront and don't like to play games, and I want to see what's best for this community as a whole, and taking the concerns and problems of everyone into consideration, not just the higher-ups that in some cases feel that they are the primary reason that this community exists, and anyone who doesn't conform to what they want can get the heck out. And I have heard that said. If you don't like what we're doing, move. That is an absolutely wrong attitude to have. People who have spent their money to move here have moved here for various reasons. Myself, because of financial. Now that financial is being turned on its head. And I don't want to see this $5 million project halfway through completion or completed, and then somebody say, well, we have this beautiful facility right next to this 50-year-old aging clubhouse, so we need to spend another $5 million to tear down a perfectly good clubhouse to build something that's going to be comparable to this $5 million CARC project that we have. One thing leads to another, and I want to stop that in its tracks.
Okay. How do you view your responsibility as a new incoming board member to carry out those decisions that were made before your tenure?
That's a mixed bag. As a board member, if I have something that has been tentatively approved and I feel it's not in the best interest or we're not getting our money's worth for it, I will fight it tooth and nail. On the other hand, if it's something that's been committed to, we've already got a financial investment in it, and it's something that really can't be changed or eliminated, then I'll have no choice but to do what I think is best for the community and try to get that project done in as efficient and cost-effective manner as can be achieved.
All right. Well, that concludes our interview. Thank you. This is Adrian Terranor, now better known as Terry. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.